I pulled my coat tighter around myself as the wind howled outside the Northwind Hotel's lobby windows. The night shift had started 2 hours ago, and the place was dead quiet, except for the occasional creak of the old building settling against the February cold. The temperature had dropped into the low teens, and the ancient heating system struggled to keep up. The front desk phone rang, cutting through the silence and making me jump. I picked up the receiver, clearing my throat. "Front desk, this is Ernest speaking. How can I help you?" "This is Donna Gonzalez in room 201. Her elderly voice sounded irritated rather than frightened. "There's some kind of banging coming from the room above me. It's been going on for 20 minutes now and I can't sleep." I frowned, mentally picturing the hotel layout. "Room above you would be 302, ma'am. I'm very sorry about the disturbance." "Well, can you do something about it? It sounds like someone's moving furniture up there." That didn't make sense. Room 302 had been closed off for renovation since before I started working here 3 months ago. "I'll head up right away to check on it, Ms. Gonzalez. Thank you for letting me know." I hung up and grabbed my master key ring from the drawer. The weight of the keys felt reassuring in my hand. Protocol said I should call for backup when investigating disturbances, but at 2 in the morning with just me on duty, there wasn't really anyone to call. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding onto the 3rd floor. The hallway stretched out before me, lit by wall sconces that cast more shadows than light. As I stepped out, I noticed how the temperature seemed to drop dramatically. My breath came out in visible puffs, which made no sense. The heating should have been working throughout the building. I walked slowly down the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the worn carpet. The closer I got to room 302, the colder it became. I rubbed my arms, wishing I'd brought my coat up with me. When I reached the door, I stopped short. It was slightly ajar, just an inch or so, with darkness visible beyond. That was impossible. This room was supposed to be locked and sealed until the renovation team came back in the spring. "Hello?" I called out, pushing the door open wider with my fingertips. "This is hotel management. Is someone in here?" The door swung inward with a long, drawn-out creak. The room beyond was pitch black except for the faint glow from the hallway light spilling in. I felt along the wall for the light switch and flipped it on. The overhead light flickered weakly, revealing a room that looked frozen in time. Plastic sheets covered what furniture remained. A fine layer of dust coated every surface. The air smelled musty and stale, with an underlying chemical odor I couldn't place. "Is anyone here?" I asked again, taking a cautious step inside. "The room is closed for renovations. You can't be in here." At first, I saw nothing unusual, just an empty, partially gutted hotel room. Then movement in the far corner caught my eye. A figure stood with its back to me, dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned hotel uniform. Not our current navy blue, but a darker, more formal style I'd never seen before. "Sir, you can't be in here. This area is off-limits to guests," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and professional. The figure turned slowly. I opened my mouth to speak again, but the words died in my throat. Where a face should have been was a horrific mess of melted flesh. The skin looked like candle wax that had run and then hardened in grotesque patterns. One eye socket was empty, the other held a cloudy, unseeing eye. What remained of the nose was just a hole in the center, and the mouth was a twisted gash. I backed up until I hit the wall, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The figure tilted what remained of its head, regarding me with that single cloudy eye. Then it spoke, and the sound didn't come from the ruined mouth. It seemed to fill the room from all directions at once. "Where is Charlotte Williamson?" The voice was raspy, like sandpaper on wood. "Have you seen her? She was supposed to clean this room." My legs went weak. I groped blindly for the doorknob behind me, unable to tear my eyes away from the thing in front of me. I don't know any Charlotte," I managed to stammer out. My fingers finally found the cool metal of the doorknob. The figure took a step toward me. She never came back. They said I did something to her. Another step. But I didn't. I would never hurt Charlotte. I yanked the door open and bolted into the hallway, not bothering to close it behind me. My feet pounded against the carpet as I ran toward the stairwell, too panicked to wait for the elevator. I threw open the stairwell door and took the steps 2 at a time, nearly falling several times. I burst into the lobby, ran past the front desk without stopping, and slammed through the main doors into the parking lot. The bitter cold hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't slow down until I reached my car. My hands shook so badly I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock the door. Once inside, I locked all the doors and sat there, gasping for breath, my whole body trembling. For 20 minutes, I just sat in my freezing car, staring at the hotel's illuminated entrance. My mind kept replaying what I'd seen, that melted face, that voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. I'd never left my post before, not once in the 3 months I'd worked here. But there was no way I was going back inside tonight. Eventually, I started the engine with numb fingers and backed out of my parking space. As I drove home through the empty streets, I couldn't stop shaking. Whatever I'd seen in room 302 wasn't human. It couldn't have been. And somehow I knew with absolute certainty that it was still there, asking about Charlotte Williamson, whoever she was. I woke up feeling like my head was stuffed with cotton. My alarm clock read 11:32, giving me just enough time to shower and grab something to eat before my shift. The events from last night kept replaying in my mind. The figure in room 302, that melted face, the voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I hadn't slept more than an hour or two. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that twisted mouth asking about Charlotte Williamson. The hot water helped, but not much. I threw on my navy uniform, the fabric still holding a faint chemical smell from the dry cleaners. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked terrible. Dark circles under my eyes, skin pale enough to make me look sick. I ran my fingers through my damp hair, trying to make myself look somewhat presentable. The drive to the North Wind felt longer than usual. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that thing from room 302 sitting in my back seat. Stupid, I know, but after what I'd seen, my brain wasn't exactly working right. I pulled into the staff parking lot 15 minutes early, hoping to slip in without having to talk to anyone about why I'd abandoned my post last night. The moment I walked through the employee entrance, I knew something was off. Marge from housekeeping gave me a look I couldn't quite read as I passed the break room. When I rounded the corner to the lobby, I stopped dead in my tracks. Seth Davis was standing by the front desk, checking his watch. Seth never came to the hotel. In the 3 months I'd been working here, I'd met him exactly twice, once during my interview and once when he dropped off payroll checks when the regular courier was sick. He was a tall man in his 60s with thinning gray hair and the kind of face that made it clear he didn't waste time on small talk. He spotted me before I could decide whether to approach or run back out the door. "Ernest," he said, his voice carrying across the lobby. "My office. Now." I followed him through the lobby to the small back office that was technically mine during night shifts. Seth closed the door behind us and motioned for me to sit. He remained standing, making me feel like a kid sent to the principal's office. "I understand there was an incident last night," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. My mouth went dry. "How did you—" "Mrs. Gonzalez called the main office this morning. Said she found the front desk abandoned when she came down for her early flight. Said she had to call a cab herself." His eyes narrowed. "She also mentioned reporting strange noises from the room above hers, room 302. I swallowed hard. "Mr. Davis, I can explain—" He held up his hand, cutting me off. "I should have given you this when you started." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the desk toward me. "This is my fault. I got complacent. It's been quiet for almost a year." I stared at the envelope without touching it. "Go ahead," he said. "Open it." My fingers felt numb as I picked it up and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper with the hotel letterhead at the top. The title read, "Northwind Hotel Safety Protocols." Below were 5 numbered rules. 1. Never enter room 302 between midnight and 6 a.m. 2. If you hear a baby crying from room 124, do not investigate. Lock yourself in the nearest storage closet until the crying stops. 3. The lobby must be vacated between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. on the night of a full moon. 4. If a man with a scar across his left eye asks for a room, tell him we're fully booked. If he calls you by name without seeing your name tag, check him into room 118 and call the police immediately. 5. Never look directly at your reflection in the mirrors of the 3rd-floor bathrooms. My hands started shaking as I read through the list a second time. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Seth took a seat across from me, suddenly looking older. "Survival instructions." "I don't understand." He sighed. "The Northwind has complications, things that don't show up in the standard hotel management training." I looked down at the paper again. "You're saying these things are real, that what I saw in room 302 was real?" Seth finished for me. "Yes, and you're lucky to be alive after walking in there at night. Most new managers don't make it past the first month." The chill that ran up my back had nothing to do with the office temperature. "How many?" "How many what?" "How many managers have you lost?" Seth looked away. 3 in the last decade. All of them ignored the rules. I put the paper down, trying to keep my hand steady. "And what exactly is in room 302? Something that used to be a man." Seth's voice was matter-of-fact. "Something that's been looking for Charlotte Williamson for almost 70 years. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. That's what it asked me. It wanted to know where Charlotte was. Seth nodded. "It always does." "Who is she?" "Was," Seth corrected. "Charlotte Williamson was a maid here in the 50s. Disappeared during her shift. They never found her body." I pushed back from the desk. "And you hire people to work here without telling them any of this?" "Would you have taken the job if I told you the hotel was haunted?" Seth asked, his expression unchanged. He had me there. I would have thought he was crazy. "Look," Seth continued, "follow the rules, and you'll be fine. Ignore them, and you won't last a week." He stood up and straightened his jacket. "I've got another meeting. Call me if there are any more incidents." With that, he walked out, leaving me alone with a list of rules and more questions than answers. I spent the rest of my shift in a daze, going through the motions of checking in guests and answering phones while my mind raced. The day manager gave me strange looks, but didn't ask why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. If she only knew. During my break, I pulled out my phone and searched for Charlotte Williamson Northwind Hotel. The first result was from the local newspaper archives. "Local maid missing, foul play suspected." The article was dated June 12, 1954. I skimmed through it, my heart beating faster with each paragraph. Charlotte Williamson, 22, had been working at the Northwind for just over a year when she vanished during her evening shift. She was last seen heading to the 3rd floor to clean rooms. Her purse and coat were found in the staff room, but Charlotte herself had seemingly disappeared into thin air. The article mentioned that police were questioning the night manager, Dylan Roberts, who had reported her missing after she failed to complete her rounds. Dylan Roberts. The name sent another chill through me. I searched again, this time for Dylan Roberts Northwind Hotel. The results made my blood run cold. A week after Charlotte's disappearance, Dylan Roberts was found dead in room 302. The cause of death was listed as suicide, but the details were strange. His face and upper body had been burned beyond recognition by some unknown chemical. The police speculated that guilt over Charlotte's disappearance had driven him to take his own life in such a horrific way. But the description of Dylan's injuries matched exactly what I'd seen last night. The melted flesh, the twisted mouth, the ruined eye. I closed the browser and leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I'd learned. The thing in room 302 wasn't some random ghost or hallucination. It was Dylan Roberts, still looking for Charlotte Williamson after all these years. And according to Seth's rules, Dylan wasn't the only thing haunting the North Wind. I folded the list of rules and tucked it into my pocket, knowing I'd be memorizing every word before my next shift. If Seth was right, and after what I'd seen, I had no reason to doubt him, my life depended on it. I heard it when the clock on my computer ticked over to 10, a soft, distant cry that drifted down the hallway like a wisp of smoke. At first, I thought I'd imagined it, just the old hotel settling or the wind pushing against the windows. But then it came again, clearer this time. The unmistakable sound of a baby crying. I looked up from the stack of invoices I'd been organizing. The front desk area was empty, the lobby quiet except for the hum of the heating system fighting against the February cold outside. The crying came again, a small, heartbroken wail that seemed to echo through the building. My first instinct was to get up and check. What kind of person hears a crying baby and doesn't investigate? I pushed back my chair and stood, then froze as my hand brushed against the folded paper in my pocket. The rules, Seth's rules. I pulled out the crumpled sheet and quickly scanned down the list until I found it. Rule number 2. If hearing baby crying from room 124, lock yourself in nearest storage closet until it stops. The crying grew louder, more insistent. My heart started racing as I tried to remember which room was 124. First floor, east wing. That matched where the sound was coming from. I shouldn't go look. I really shouldn't. But what if the rules were just Seth being paranoid? What if there actually was a baby in distress? What if someone had left their child alone in the room? The crying hitched, then broke into a desperate, gasping sob that made my chest tighten. It sounded so real, so genuinely distressed. I took 2 steps toward the hallway before catching myself. No, the rules weren't suggestions. Seth had made that crystal clear. 3 night managers dead in the past decade. This wasn't a joke or a test, it was survival. The nearest storage closet was down the hall past the break room. I grabbed my phone from the desk, switched on its flashlight, and hurried through the back office area. The crying followed me, somehow seeming both more distant and more present at the same time. I fumbled with my master key at the storage closet door, my hands shaking as the crying rose to a fever pitch. The lock clicked, and I practically fell inside, pulling the door shut behind me. My trembling fingers found the interior lock and twisted it. Darkness enveloped me as I turned off my phone's flashlight to save battery. The closet was tiny, barely big enough for the cleaning supplies, vacuum, and me. The air smelled of bleach and furniture polish. I slid down against the door until I was sitting on the cold tile floor, knees pulled up to my chest. I could still hear it. The crying penetrated the door like it wasn't even there. Minutes passed. 5. 10. The crying didn't stop. If anything, it grew more insistent, more desperate. I checked my watch in the dim light from my phone, 10:17. How long was this going to last? My back started to ache from sitting on the hard floor. The small space felt like it was getting smaller, the darkness thicker. I'd never been claustrophobic before, but being locked in a pitch-black closet while a phantom baby wailed was pushing me to my limits. It's not real, I whispered to myself, though the sound coming through the door certainly felt real enough. It's not real. 20 minutes in, sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool air. My shirt stuck to my back. The crying had taken on a different quality now, less like a baby and more like Something else. Something using a baby's cry as bait. I checked my phone again. 10:32. The battery was at 60%. I turned it off completely to conserve power. The darkness pressed in around me. I closed my eyes, then opened them again, finding no difference. My breathing sounded too loud in the confined space. The crying continued, relentless. What would have happened if I'd gone to room 124? Would I have found an empty room like Seth implied? Or would I have found something waiting for me? Something that had claimed 3 night managers before me? I lost track of time in the darkness. My legs went numb. My mouth felt dry. Still, the crying continued, sometimes fading slightly only to return with renewed vigor. I checked my watch occasionally, the luminous dial the only thing visible in the pitch black. 10:47, 11:22. At 11:27, the crying stopped so abruptly that the silence felt like a physical blow. I held my breath, straining to hear. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the building systems and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I waited, counting the minutes on my watch. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Nothing but silence. At 11:47, exactly 47 minutes after I'd locked myself in, I finally gathered the courage to unlock the door. I turned my phone back on, wincing at the sudden brightness of the screen, and used the flashlight to check the closet for I don't know what. Everything looked normal, just cleaning supplies and hotel inventory. My legs had fallen asleep, and I stumbled slightly as I stepped into the hallway. The corridor was empty and silent. No sign that anything unusual had happened. I walked slowly toward the east wing, my footsteps echoing on the tile floor. Room 124 was at the end of the hall, a standard room like any other, its door firmly closed. I stood outside for a long moment, keycard in hand, listening. Nothing. No sound at all from inside. With a deep breath, I swiped the master key and pushed the door open. The room was dark and completely empty. The bed was made, the surfaces dust-free. No luggage, no signs of occupancy, no baby, nothing out of place at all. Just a perfectly ordinary unoccupied hotel room. I checked the bathroom. Empty. The closet. Empty. Under the bed. Nothing. I backed out of the room, letting the door close and lock behind me. My shirt was soaked with sweat, my legs still tingling as circulation returned. For 47 minutes, I'd heard a baby crying from this room. A room that was completely empty and undisturbed. The rules weren't suggestions or precautions. They were lifelines in a place where reality didn't work the way it should. When my shift ended at 7, I drove home in a daze, the memory of that crying still echoing in my head. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I had gone to room 124 when I first heard it, I wouldn't have made it home at all. I showered, changed, and sat at my kitchen table with a fresh notebook. With careful precision, I rewrote each of Seth's 5 rules, adding details from my experience with rule number 2. Rule 1. Never enter room 302 between midnight 6 a.m. Rule 2. If hearing baby crying from room 124, lock yourself in nearest storage closet until it stops. Lasted 47 minutes on February 18th. Rule 3. Vacate lobby 8 to 9 p.m. on full moon nights. Rule 4. If scarred man asks for room, claim full booking unless he knows your name without seeing name tag. Then give room 118 and call police. Rule 5. Never look directly at third floor bathroom mirrors. I stared at the list, committing each rule to memory. The hotel had already tested me twice, first with Dylan Roberts in room 302, and now with whatever lurked in room 124. 3 more rules remained untested, and I had no doubt my next challenge would come soon enough. Failing wasn't an option. Not if I wanted to survive this job, not if I wanted to survive at all. I was juggling the Pattersons' luggage on a Friday night when the elevator decided to break down. Just my luck. The lobby buzzed with weekend arrivals, phones ringing off the hook while I tried to haul 2 oversized suitcases toward the stairwell. "I'm so sorry about this, Mr. Patterson. The maintenance guy should have the elevator fixed by morning." I shifted the weight of the bags, my shoulders already aching. "Let me get these up to your room." Mr. Patterson, a round-faced businessman in his 50s, waved his hand. "Don't worry about it, young man. 2nd floor isn't so bad." His wife looked less convinced, eyeing the stairs with visible dread. I couldn't blame her. The Pattersons had arrived after a 6-hour drive, and now they faced a climb with their remaining bags. As we reached the stairs, I noticed a man approach the front desk. Something about him made me pause. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that looked tailored to his tall frame, but it was his face that caught my attention. A deep scar ran from his left temple, crossed directly over his eye, and continued down to his cheekbone. The eye itself appeared functional, which surprised me given the severity of the mark. "I'll be right with you, sir," I called over my shoulder, then turned back to the Pattersons. "Just follow me up. Watch your step on that 3rd stair. It creaks." We made our way to the 2nd floor, and I set their bags inside room 212. Mr. Patterson tipped me $5 despite my polite refusal. By the time I returned to the lobby, the scarred man stood perfectly still at the front desk, hands folded neatly on the counter. "Welcome to Northwind Hotel. How can I help you?" I asked, stepping behind the desk. The man's eyes fixed on mine with unusual intensity. "I need a room for the night." Something cold settled in my stomach as I remembered Seth's rules. Rule 4. If a scarred man asks for a room, claim full booking unless he knows your name without seeing your name tag. I glanced down at my chest, where my name tag had flipped around during the luggage struggle. Just a blank white rectangle showed. "I'm sorry, sir. We're fully booked tonight." I kept my voice steady while pulling up our reservation system, making a show of checking availability. The man leaned slightly forward. "Are you certain? Perhaps you could check again. I only need 1 room. Any room will do." I shook my head. "I apologize, but with the convention in town, we've been booked solid for weeks." His lips curved into what might have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's disappointing, Ernest." My blood turned to ice. He'd used my name, my first name, despite having no way to see it. "Actually," I said, forcing myself to maintain eye contact, "I might have 1 room that just opened up. Let me check that for you." My fingers felt numb as I typed. "Yes, room 118 is available. How will you be paying tonight?" "Cash." He pulled out a money clip and peeled off several crisp $100 bills. I completed the check-in process mechanically, handing him a key card. "Room 118 is on the 1st floor, East Wing. Will you be needing assistance with luggage?" "No luggage," he replied, taking the key. "I travel light." As soon as he turned toward the east hallway, I picked up the phone and dialed the police. My hand shook so badly I misdialed twice. "This is Northwind Hotel," I whispered when the dispatcher finally answered. "We need officers immediately. We have a potentially dangerous individual who just checked in." The dispatcher asked several questions about the nature of the threat. I explained as best I could without sounding crazy. Suspicious behavior, concerning demeanor, possible threat to guests. "Officers will be there shortly," she assured me. I spent the next 20 minutes watching the hallway to room 118, making sure the scarred man didn't leave. An elderly couple entered the lobby, the Harrises, regular guests who stayed with us every few months. Mr. Harris, or Theo as he insisted I call him, waved cheerfully as they approached the desk. "Evening, Ernest. Got our usual room ready?" Theo asked. His wife Caitlin smiled warmly beside him. They were in their 70s, the kind of sweet couple who still held hands everywhere they went. "Yes, sir. Room 224, just as you requested." I returned his smile while keeping one eye on the east hallway. "Let me get your keys ready." As I processed their check-in, 2 police officers entered through the main doors. Officer Reeves, a tall woman with her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, approached first. Her partner, Officer Morris, a stocky man with a close-cropped beard, surveyed the lobby with practiced eyes. "You called about a suspicious individual?" Officer Reeves asked quietly. "Yes, thank you for coming." I nodded toward the east wing. "Room 118, he just checked in about 20 minutes ago." "What exactly did this person do that concerned you?" Officer Morris asked. Before I could answer, movement from the hallway caught my attention. The scarred man emerged, walking directly toward us. The officers turned to face him. "Sir, could we have a word with you?" Officer Reeves called out, her hand resting casually near her holster. The man stopped, his eyes moving from the officers to me, then to the elderly couple. Something changed in his expression, a hardening, a focus that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Is there a problem?" he asked, voice eerily calm. "Just need to ask you a few questions," Officer Morris said, stepping forward. "Could I see some identification, please?" The scarred man reached slowly into his jacket. What happened next occurred so fast I barely processed it. Instead of a wallet, his hand emerged holding a knife with a blade that caught the lobby lights. He lunged past the officers, straight toward Mrs. Harris. Theo moved with surprising speed for a man his age, stepping in front of his wife. The knife slashed across his arm as he raised it defensively. Blood immediately soaked through his sleeve as he cried out in pain. Mrs. Harris screamed. The officers drew their weapons, shouting commands. I ducked behind the desk, spotted the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall, and grabbed it without thinking. I rushed forward as the scarred man raised the knife again. With shaking hands, I pulled the pin and squeezed the handle, blasting a cloud of white powder directly into the attacker's face. He staggered backward, momentarily blinded. Officer Reeves took advantage of the distraction, tackling him to the ground with impressive force. "Drop the weapon! Now!" For a second it looked like they had him subdued. Then, with a strength that seemed impossible, the scarred man threw Officer Reeves off him. She crashed into a nearby coffee table, shattering the glass top. The man bolted toward the stairwell, moving inhumanly fast. Officer Morris fired a shot that missed, embedding in the wall as the stairwell door slammed shut. "Stay with them!" Officer Reeves shouted to her partner as she got to her feet and raced after the suspect. I rushed to the Harrises. Theo sat on one of the lobby chairs, clutching his bleeding arm while Caitlin pressed a handkerchief against the wound. "Are you okay?" I asked, kneeling beside them. "Just a cut," Theo grimaced. "Deeper than I'd like, but I'll live." Officer Morris called for backup and an ambulance while keeping his weapon ready. "What the hell just happened?" he muttered. More police arrived within minutes, along with paramedics who immediately attended to Theo. The cut required 17 stitches, they announced after examining it. Officers conducted a room-by-room search of the entire hotel, starting with room 118, which they found completely empty. No personal belongings, no signs anyone had been there at all. I accompanied 2 officers to the 3rd floor when they expanded their search. As we walked down the hallway, one of them pointed to the carpet near the stairwell door. "What's that?" A dark stain marked the gray carpet. Not blood, but something else. Black and oily, it seemed to absorb the light around it. When one officer crouched to examine it more closely, his partner pulled him back. "Don't touch that," she warned. "Get forensics up here." They radioed down for more assistance while continuing their search. By morning, after hours of investigation, they found no trace of the scarred man. He had vanished completely, leaving behind only that strange stain and 17 stitches in Theo Harris's arm as proof he'd ever existed at all. I endured my most terrifying test during an October full moon. The date had been circled in red on my calendar for weeks, a stark reminder of rule number 3. Vacate lobby 8-9 p.m. on full moon nights. I'd made careful plans to avoid the lobby completely during that hour. My dinner, a ham sandwich and potato chips from the vending machine, sat waiting in the back office. I'd moved my paperwork there, set up my laptop, and even brought a small electric kettle for tea. The night had been quiet so far. Only 3 occupied rooms, all business travelers who'd checked in early and hadn't emerged since. At 8:15, I poured hot water over a tea bag and settled in for 45 minutes of isolation. The back office wasn't much, just a desk, my chair, and filing cabinets, but it felt secure with its solid door between me and whatever roamed the lobby during full moons. At 8:28, the fire alarm blared from the kitchen. The harsh, pulsing wail made me jump, splashing hot tea across my hand. I hissed, wiping it on my pants as I stood. The alarm panel on the wall flashed red. Kitchen smoke detector 1. Shit, I muttered, staring at the clock. 8:29. I knew the protocol. Check the source of the alarm. Reset if false. Call the fire department if real. The kitchen was on the other side of the hotel, and the only way there was through the lobby. I pulled the rules list from my pocket, scanning Rule 3 again. Vacate lobby 8-9 p.m. on full moon nights. No exceptions, no explanation, but a fire alarm couldn't be ignored. If it was real, people could die. If it was false and I didn't reset it, guests would be forced to evacuate for nothing. I took a deep breath and opened the office door. The alarm continued its ear-splitting wail as I stepped into the hallway. Just a quick dash through the lobby, I told myself, maybe 30 seconds total. The moment I stepped into the lobby, every light went out at once. The alarm cut off mid-blare, plunging the space into absolute silence and darkness. 1 second, there had been fluorescent brightness and noise. The next, nothing. Not even emergency lights. The darkness was complete. A solid wall of black that seemed to press against my eyes. "Hello?" I called, my voice small in the vast space. No answer, no sound at all. Not even the usual creaks and hums of the building. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, but it wasn't there. I'd left it charging in the office. Then I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps from the direction of the east hallway. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of dress shoes on marble. I froze. The footsteps continued, measured and unhurried. Then another set started from the direction of the front doors. Tap, tap, tap. The same pace, different location. A third set began from the west hallway. They were circling me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I tried to orient myself. I'd come about 10 feet into the lobby. The front desk should be... I extended my hands, feeling nothing but air. The footsteps drew closer, coming from 3 different directions now. Following my instincts, I dropped to my hands and knees. The carpet felt rough against my palms as I crawled forward, hoping I was heading toward the desk. The footsteps adjusted, changing course. They knew where I was. "Ernest," came a whisper from my left. The voice was dry and brittle, like pages of an old book rubbing together. "Ernest Stone," came another from behind me, this one wet and gurgling. I kept crawling, my breath coming in short gasps. My hand hit something solid, the base of the front desk. I scrambled around it, pressing my back against the wood panel, trying to make myself as small as possible. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, I thought perhaps they'd lost me. Then something cold touched my shoulder. It felt exactly like skeletal fingers, hard, dry bone with no flesh to cushion it. The fingers pressed down, 5 distinct points of contact. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming, tasting copper as blood filled my mouth. "We see you, Ernest," the dry voice whispered, now directly above me. "We've been waiting," said the wet voice from my other side. I felt breath on my neck, cold and damp. It smelled of decay and stagnant water, like something that had been submerged for years. The whispers grew louder, more voices joining in, all saying my name in different tones, some pleading, some angry, some almost singing. "Please," I whispered, the word barely audible even to myself. The skeletal hand moved from my shoulder to my neck, fingers positioning themselves over my throat. Another hand, this one feeling swollen and soft like waterlogged flesh, grabbed my wrist. A third hand, burning hot, pressed against my back between my shoulder blades. I closed my eyes, though it made no difference in the darkness. The blood from my bitten tongue filled my mouth. I swallowed it down, fighting the urge to vomit. The hands tightened their grip. The whispers rose to a crescendo, dozens of voices now, all around me, inside me. And then, at exactly 9 p.m., the lights returned. The sudden brightness stung my eyes. I blinked rapidly, disoriented. The hands were gone. The whispers silenced. The lobby stood empty and ordinary, with not a single thing out of place. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioning. I remained behind the desk for several minutes, unable to move. My legs felt weak, my hands trembling so badly I had to press them against the carpet to steady them. My tongue throbbed where I'd bitten it and I could still taste blood. When I finally managed to stand, my knees nearly buckled. I grabbed the edge of the desk to stay upright, looking around the empty lobby. Everything appeared normal. The clock above the entrance read 9:05. I made my way back to the office on shaky legs. My phone sat on the desk, exactly where I'd left it. Next to it, the fire alarm panel showed all systems normal. No alerts, no triggered alarms. I sank into my chair, the reality of what had just happened washing over me. I'd narrowly avoided breaking another rule, and whatever punishment that would have brought, if I'd stayed in that lobby even a minute longer. I pulled out my notebook and added a note beneath Rule 3. Do not enter lobby under any circumstances during this time. Fire alarms during this period are false. My hand was still shaking as I wrote, the letters uneven and jagged, but I needed to remember. I needed to be more careful, because next time I might not make it to 9 p.m. I first noticed the changes 6 months after Seth handed me the rules. Nothing dramatic, just small things, like how I'd jump at the sound of ice dropping in the hotel's machine, or flinch when the ancient radiator pipes knocked. I wasn't the same guy who'd taken this job with a smile and a firm handshake. The worst part was the mirrors. I used to check my appearance without thinking, straighten my tie, fix my hair. Now I avoided my reflection unless the room was flooded with light. Too many shadows and my brain would start playing tricks, showing me things that weren't there. Things with melted faces. I flicked on my flashlight as I walked to my car after my shift ended, scanning the empty parking lot. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating patches of cracked asphalt. I never walked anywhere in the dark without it anymore. The weight of it in my hand was reassuring, a small barrier between me and whatever might be waiting in the shadows. My key fob chirped as I unlocked my car, and I slid inside quickly, locking the doors before turning the key. The engine sputtered to life, and I sat for a moment, taking a deep breath. Another night survived at the Northwind Hotel. Sleep didn't come easy anymore. I'd drift off only to jerk awake an hour later, heart pounding, sheets damp with sweat. The nightmares were always the same. Dylan Roberts with his face melting like candle wax, asking about Charlotte. Sometimes the scarred man joined him, calling my name in that too familiar way. Other times I dreamed about those cold hands grabbing me in the lobby darkness, pulling me down into something I couldn't see. I'd wake up gasping, fumbling for the lamp, needing to chase away the darkness. Then I'd lie there staring at the ceiling until my alarm went off. Despite everything, the fear, the nightmares, the constant feeling of being watched, I kept showing up for my shifts. I hadn't missed a single day. I'd survived every encounter by following Seth's rules to the letter. The rules worked. They kept me alive. I pulled into the hotel parking lot for my night shift, parking in my usual spot near the employee entrance. The North Wind looked almost normal in the early evening light, just an old hotel with peeling paint and outdated decor. But I knew better. The night started quietly. A few check-ins, some phone calls about reservations, paperwork that needed filing, normal hotel stuff that almost made me forget what kind of place I was working in. Around midnight, I decided to tackle the basement storage area. Seth had mentioned we needed to archive some old billing records, and I figured the quiet night was perfect for the task. I grabbed my flashlight, never went anywhere in the hotel without it now, and headed down the stairs to the basement. The basement was a maze of narrow corridors and storage rooms. The main area housed the boiler and electrical panels, but smaller rooms branched off in all directions, filled with everything from broken furniture to decades of paperwork. The air smelled musty, like old paper and dust. I found the billing records that needed archiving and started looking for space on the shelves. As I moved some boxes, I noticed something odd about the wall behind them. The paint was slightly different, newer than the surrounding area. I ran my fingers along the edge and felt a slight draft. Pushing harder, I was surprised when a section of the wall moved inward, revealing a hidden door. My heart rate picked up. Secret rooms were never good news in places like the North Wind, but curiosity won out over caution. I shined my flashlight through the opening and saw a small room lined with filing cabinets. The space looked untouched for years, dust coating every surface. I stepped inside, sweeping my light across the room. The filing cabinets were labeled by year, stretching back to the hotel's opening. But what caught my eye was a cabinet marked Personnel, 1950-1959. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled open the drawer. The folders inside were organized alphabetically, and I flipped through them until I reached the Rs. Roberts Dillon. I pulled out the file and set it on top of the cabinet, opening it carefully as if it might disintegrate in my hands. The first page was a standard employee record with basic information. Hired January 12, 1953, as night manager. Excellent performance reviews. Recommended for promotion. Then I saw the photograph. It was clipped to his employment application. A black and white image of a young man in his mid-20s. He had dark hair, neatly combed to the side, a strong jaw, and kind eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners. He was smiling at the camera, looking confident and friendly. This was Dylan Roberts before whatever happened to his face. Before he became the thing that haunted room 302. I kept reading, turning pages carefully. Most were routine. Pay stubs, vacation requests, performance evaluations. Then I found a personal information update form dated March 1954. Dylan had changed his emergency contact to Charlotte Williamson, listing her as his fiancée. My stomach tightened. They had been engaged. The next document was a report written by the day manager, dated June 13, 1954. It stated that Dylan had reported Charlotte missing after she failed to return from cleaning rooms on the 3rd floor. He had searched the entire hotel but couldn't find her. The police had been called. The final item in the folder was a newspaper clipping from the local paper dated June 20th, 1954. Police investigate hotel maid's disappearance. Local authorities continue to search for Charlotte Williamson, 22, who disappeared from her job at the Northwind Hotel last week. Police have questioned night manager Dylan Roberts extensively, as he was the last person to see Miss Williamson alive. Sources close to the investigation report that evidence of violence was found in room 302, where Miss Williamson was scheduled to work the night of her disappearance. Mr. Roberts maintains his innocence, claiming he is concerned only with finding his missing fiancée. The article continued, but my eyes kept going back to that one phrase. Evidence of violence was found in room 302. The final entry in the file was a brief note stating that Dylan Roberts had been found dead in room 302 on June 21, 1954, an apparent suicide. The cause of death was listed as chemical burns from an unidentified substance. The case of Charlotte Williamson remained open. I closed the file and leaned against the cabinet, my mind racing. The ghost in room 302 was looking for Charlotte. his fiancée who disappeared while cleaning that very room. But the police had found evidence suggesting Dylan might have been responsible for whatever happened to her. Was Dylan searching for Charlotte because he loved her and wanted to find her? Or was he trying to hide what he'd done to her? I thought about the melted face, the desperate way he'd asked about Charlotte. They said I did something to her, but I didn't. I would never hurt Charlotte. Who were they? The police? Hotel management? And was he telling the truth? I put the file back exactly where I'd found it and backed out of the hidden room, pulling the door closed behind me. The billing records I'd come down to archive sat forgotten on a nearby shelf. As I climbed the stairs back to the lobby, I couldn't shake the image of Dylan's photograph, the handsome young man with kind eyes who became the melted face horror that haunted the third floor. Something terrible had happened in this hotel almost 70 years ago, and it wasn't over. Charlotte was still missing. Dylan was still searching, and I was caught in the middle of their unfinished story. I was cleaning out one of the storage closets in the basement when I found it. The closet had been on my to-do list for weeks, a jumbled mess of cleaning supplies, old guest directories, and boxes of outdated letterhead from when the hotel changed logos 5 years back. My flashlight beam cut through the dusty air as I pulled out the last box from the bottom shelf. Something caught my eye behind where the box had been, a dark shape wedged into the gap between the shelf and the wall. I reached back, my fingers brushing against what felt like leather, and pulled. A small journal slid out, bound in cracked brown leather that had gone stiff with age. It was about the size of my hand, the kind people used to carry in coat pockets. I brushed off a thick layer of dust and opened the cover. The first page had a name written in careful cursive: Charlotte Williamson, 1953. My stomach dropped. I sat back on my heels, the cold concrete floor seeping through my pants as I stared at the name, Charlotte. The woman Dylan Roberts had been searching for since the 50s, the missing maid whose disappearance had haunted the hotel for almost 70 years. I flipped through the pages, finding entries about daily life at the North Wind. Charlotte wrote about difficult guests, other staff members, the weather. Her handwriting was neat and precise, the kind they used to teach in schools when penmanship mattered. I turned to the final pages, my heart beating faster when I saw the last entry was dated June 12, 1954, the day she disappeared. The entry started normally enough. Exhausted today. Mrs. Mitchell in 215 complained about her sheets again, though I changed them yesterday. Mr. Roberts asked me to handle the third-floor rooms tonight since Alice called in sick. I don't mind. He's always been kind to me, especially since we got engaged. 3 months until the wedding. I can hardly believe it. But then the tone changed. Something strange happened in 302 today. I was changing the towels when I noticed the vent cover was loose. When I went to fix it, I found an envelope hidden inside. It contained cash and a diamond brooch I recognized from Mrs. Holloway's description of what was stolen from her room last month. There were other items too. A gold watch, pearl earrings, things guests reported missing. I don't understand. Why would these be hidden in a vent in room 302? The only person with access to all the rooms is Dylan. But he wouldn't. Would he? I need to think about what to do. I'll talk to him tonight after my shift. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. Charlotte had found evidence that Dylan was stealing from guests, and she disappeared the same day. For hours, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd read. I finished cleaning the closet mechanically, my mind replaying Charlotte's words over and over. By the time my shift ended, I'd made a decision. I took the journal home with me, breaking my own rule about never removing anything from the hotel. That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing Charlotte's handwriting in my mind, imagining her finding those stolen items, the confusion and hurt she must have felt. Sometime after 3 in the morning, I finally drifted off. My next shift started at 10 p.m. The hotel was quiet, Only 5 rooms occupied, all business travelers who'd checked in earlier and gone straight to bed. I sat at the front desk, the journal hidden in my bag beneath the counter. Every few minutes I found myself glancing toward the elevator, thinking about the 3rd floor. Around midnight I heard it, the sound of furniture moving overhead, a slow, dragging noise that seemed to come from directly above the lobby, room 302. I knew I should ignore it. Every instinct told me to stay put, to remember what happened the last time I went up there. But Charlotte's journal weighed on me. She deserved the truth to be known. She deserved justice even 70 years later. I took a deep breath and stood up. From my bag, I pulled out my flashlight and the journal. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the 3rd floor, and waited as the old car groaned its way upward. The doors opened to the now familiar chill of the 3rd floor hallway. My breath clouded in front of me as I stepped out, the carpet muffling my footsteps. The dragging sound continued, definitely coming from 302. I walked toward it, the beam of my flashlight steady despite my fear. When I reached the door, I found it slightly open, just like the first time. But now I wasn't here by accident or obligation. I was here by choice. "Dylan," I called out, pushing the door wider. "I know you're in here." The room looked the same as before. Plastic-covered furniture, dust, the strange chemical smell. But this time, Dylan stood by the window, his back to me. He wore the same outdated uniform, his posture rigid. "I know what happened to Charlotte," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I found her journal." Dylan turned slowly. His melted face caught the light from my flashlight, the twisted flesh where his features should have been somehow expressing what looked like grief. "Where is Charlotte?" he asked, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere as it had before. "She's gone, Dylan. She's been gone for 70 years. And I think you know why." He tilted his head, the motion unnaturally smooth. "I would never hurt Charlotte." "She found the things you stole," I said, holding up the journal. "She wrote about it the day she disappeared. She found jewelry and cash hidden in the vent in this room. Things that had been stolen from guests." Dylan didn't speak. Instead, he raised one arm and pointed toward the floor near the window. I followed the direction of his gesture, seeing a section of floorboards that looked slightly different from the rest. I approached cautiously, keeping my distance from Dylan. Kneeling down, I saw that one board was looser than the others. I set down the journal and flashlight, then worked my fingers under the edge of the board. It came up with surprising ease, revealing a small space beneath. Inside was a cloth bag, yellowed with age. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small heart pendant and a folded piece of paper. The creases so deeply set it looked like it might crumble. I carefully unfolded the paper. The handwriting matched Charlotte's from the journal. "I can't believe what I've discovered. Dylan has been stealing from guests for months. When I confronted him about what I found in the vent, he admitted everything. He said he needed the money for our future, that the hotel didn't pay enough for the life he wanted to give me. I told him I couldn't marry someone who would steal from others. I'm going to Mr. Mitchell in the morning." Dylan became so angry. I've never seen him like that. He locked the door and said I couldn't tell anyone. He had a bottle of something in his hand and said if I ruined his reputation, he would... The note stopped mid-sentence. I looked up at Dylan, understanding washing over me. The acid burns on his face, the missing maid. It all made horrible sense. "You killed her," I whispered. Dylan's form seemed to flicker, the air around him darkening. "She was going to leave me," he said, his voice suddenly clearer, sharper. "She was going to ruin everything." I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the necklace, note, and journal. Dylan moved toward me, his motion no longer stiff but fluid, predatory. In his hand appeared a glass bottle filled with clear liquid. "No one believes me," he said. "They all think I hurt her, but she hurt me first." He lunged forward, the bottle raised high. I dodged to the side, feeling the rush of air as he missed me by inches. The bottle smashed against the wall where I'd been standing, liquid splashing and immediately eating into the wallpaper with a hissing sound. I ran for the door, heart pounding in my chest. Behind me, Dylan let out an inhuman wail. I made it through the doorway just as something hit the door with tremendous force, slamming it shut inches from my back. I leaned against the opposite wall, gasping for breath, the evidence of Dylan's crime clutched in my shaking hands. From inside room 302, I could hear Dylan's voice, no longer asking about Charlotte, but screaming her name over and over in rage. I brought Charlotte's evidence straight to Seth first thing the next morning. The leather journal sat heavy in my jacket pocket as I knocked on his office door, my other hand clutching the cloth bag with Charlotte's silver necklace and unfinished note. "Come in," Seth called. I pushed the door open to find him at his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed some paperwork. He looked up, taking in my disheveled appearance. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I haven't." I pulled out Charlotte's journal and placed it on his desk, followed by the cloth bag. "I found these." Seth removed his glasses, set them aside, and picked up the journal. He flipped through a few pages, his expression unchanged. When he reached the final entry, he read it carefully, then examined the necklace and note from the cloth bag. "You don't seem surprised," I said. Seth leaned back in his chair. "My grandfather owned this hotel when Charlotte disappeared." That caught me off guard. "Your grandfather? You never mentioned that." "Mitchell was my mother's maiden name. My grandfather was Harold Mitchell." Seth tapped his finger on Charlotte's final journal entry. "The Mr. Mitchell she mentions here." I sat down across from him, my exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "So you knew about Dylan and Charlotte all along?" "Not everything, but enough." Seth placed the items back on his desk. "My grandfather pushed the police hard to investigate Dylan. He was convinced Dylan had something to do with Charlotte's disappearance." "He was right," I said. "Dylan killed her. That note proves it." Seth nodded. "But without a body, the case went cold. Police searched the hotel, interviewed staff, but found nothing conclusive. Just that bottle of acid in room 302 and Dylan's body." "Why didn't you tell me this when you gave me the rules?" "Would you have believed me?" Seth asked. "That ghosts were real? That one was hunting for a woman he murdered? You needed to see it for yourself first." I rubbed my eyes. "So, what do we do now?" "Nothing's changed. Follow the rules. Stay alive." Seth gathered Charlotte's belongings and handed them back to me. "But I believe Dylan killed her and hid her body somewhere in this hotel. That's why he's still here. That's why she's still missing." I pocketed the items. "You think her body is still in the hotel after all these years? This place has a lot of forgotten spaces. Sealed rooms, old maintenance tunnels." Seth looked at me with tired eyes. "Just keep following the rules, Ernest. That's all any of us can do." That night, I sat in the back office sorting through invoices when the crying started. It was 10 past 10, and the sound came from the east wing, from room 124. The baby's wail was just as I remembered. Insistent, desperate, wrong. I reached for my pocket where I kept the rules, but stopped. Something Seth had said kept repeating in my mind. That's why she's still missing. Charlotte was missing. Dylan was searching. And something in room 124 cried like a baby. I stood up, went to the supply closet, and grabbed the container of rock salt we kept for icy walkways. Rule 2 said to lock myself in a closet when the crying started, but Seth's rules had another section I'd never tried, a way to address certain entities directly. The crying grew louder as I approached room 124. My hands shook as I poured a line of salt across the doorway threshold. The carpet absorbed some of it, but a visible white line remained. I took a deep breath and recited the words from memory. "You are known. You are heard. show your true self, or depart. For a moment, nothing changed. The crying continued, but then it shifted, warped and stretched until it transformed into a woman's sobbing. Not a baby at all, but a woman in deep distress. I used my master key to unlock the door, pushed it open, and stepped over the salt line. A woman sat on the edge of the bed. She wore a maid's uniform from another era, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her form wasn't solid. I could see the headboard through her body, but she was clearly Charlotte Williamson. Her face matched the photograph from Dylan's personnel file, though her eyes were red from crying. "Charlotte?" I asked. She looked up, surprised. "You can see me?" "Yes." I stayed by the door, unsure what to do next. "I found your journal, and the note you were writing when Dylan attacked you." Charlotte's transparent form flickered like a faulty light. "He was so angry. I told him I couldn't marry a thief." Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming through an old radio. "When I threatened to tell Mr. Mitchell, Dylan grabbed the acid he'd stolen from maintenance. He said if he couldn't have me, no one would." "I'm sorry," I said, not knowing what else to offer. "I can't leave." Charlotte's form flickered again. "Dylan trapped me here. He used the acid on himself after he hid my body. His spirit is bound to this place, and he's bound me to it as well." I took a step closer. "How can I help you?" "Find me." Charlotte stood, her movements jerky and unnatural. "Find my remains. That's the only way I can be free of him." "Where are you? Where did he put you?" "Behind the boiler room. There's an old maintenance tunnel that was sealed off in the 50s. Charlotte's form began to fade. "Hurry, he knows I'm speaking to you. He'll try to stop you." "Wait," I called, but she was already gone, leaving the room empty and silent. I hurried back to the office and grabbed my flashlight. The boiler room was in the deepest part of the basement, past the laundry and storage areas. I'd only been down there once during my orientation tour. The basement corridors were cold and poorly lit. My flashlight beam bounced off concrete walls as I made my way through the maze of hallways. The boiler room door was heavy metal, marked with faded warning signs. It creaked when I pushed it open. Heat hit me immediately. The massive boiler that heated the hotel dominated the room, pipes running from it in all directions. I swept my flashlight around, looking for anything that might indicate a sealed tunnel. Behind the boiler, partially hidden by supply shelves, I noticed a section of wall that looked different from the rest. Newer concrete, a slightly different color. I moved the shelves aside and examined the wall more closely. There was a thin seam around the edges, suggesting it had once been an opening. I looked around and found a rusty crowbar among the maintenance tools. It took all my strength to work it into the seam and pry at the concrete. Small chunks broke away, revealing older brick behind it. I kept working, my shirt soaked with sweat from both exertion and the boiler room heat. After 20 minutes of chipping away, I'd created a hole large enough to shine my flashlight through. Beyond was a narrow tunnel, its floor covered in decades of dust. I enlarged the opening until I could squeeze through, scraping my shoulders on the rough edges. The tunnel extended about 20 feet before ending at a brick wall. But halfway down, something lay on the ground, wrapped in what looked like an old blanket. My heart pounded as I approached. The blanket had once been white with the Northwind Hotel logo, now yellowed with age. I knelt beside it, hesitating before pulling back a corner. Bones. A human skull stared up at me, surrounded by the skeletal remains of a small, framed woman. Around the neck bones lay a delicate silver chain that had survived the decades. The other half of the heart pendant I'd found in room 302. "Charlotte," I whispered. As I uncovered more of the remains, a scream of rage echoed throughout the building. Dylan's scream. It reverberated through the walls and pipes, a howl of fury that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then came the slamming. Every door in the hotel, from the basement storage rooms to the guest rooms on the upper floors, all slamming shut simultaneously with a thunderous crash that shook the entire building. Dust rained down from the tunnel ceiling as the sound echoed away into silence. I carefully wrapped the blanket back around Charlotte's remains. Dylan knew I'd found her. Whatever protection the sealed tunnel had provided was gone now, and I needed to get out before he could do anything else. As I gathered the bundle, something small clattered to the floor. I shined my flashlight down and spotted a hotel room key with a faded tag marked 302. It must have been in Charlotte's pocket when Dylan killed her, evidence he couldn't afford to have found. I picked up the key and tucked it into my pocket, then lifted Charlotte's remains. The bundle was lighter than I expected, bones and fabric weighing almost nothing after all these years. I maneuvered backward through the hole I'd made, careful not to damage anything. The boiler room felt eerily quiet when I emerged. The constant mechanical hum of the building system seemed muted, as if the hotel itself was holding its breath. I made my way to the stairs, refusing to use the elevator with my grim burden. Each floor I climbed felt colder than the last. By the time I reached the lobby, my breath clouded in front of me despite the heating system running at full capacity. The front doors looked miles away across the empty marble expanse. I took a step forward and all the lights went out. "You took her from me." Dylan's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, surrounding me in the darkness. I clutched Charlotte's remains tighter and kept moving, using what little moonlight filtered through the windows to guide me. "She was mine," Dylan's voice hissed, now directly behind me. "She will always be mine." I didn't look back. "She never belonged to you, Dylan. You killed her because she found out what you were." Something cold brushed against my neck. I jerked away and quickened my pace. "Put her back," Dylan demanded, his voice distorting with rage. "Put her back!" The lobby furniture began to slide across the floor, scraping against marble as invisible forces pushed chairs and tables toward me, blocking my path to the door. A heavy vase flew from the reception desk and shattered against the wall inches from my head. I ducked and weaved between the moving obstacles, Charlotte's remains cradled in my arms. Just a few more steps to the door. "You can't take her?" Dylan screamed, his voice breaking into something inhuman. The temperature dropped so suddenly that frost began forming on the windows. "I won't let you." My hand reached the door handle just as something grabbed my ankle. I looked down to see a melted, disfigured hand emerging from the floor, fingers digging into my skin. I kicked hard, breaking its grip, and pushed through the door into the night air. Outside, the hotel's exterior lights flickered wildly. I hurried to my car, placed Charlotte's remains carefully in the passenger seat, and slid behind the wheel. My hands shook so badly I dropped the keys twice before managing to start the engine. As I pulled away from the Northwind Hotel, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Dylan stood in the doorway, his melted face contorted with fury, watching me take Charlotte away from him after 70 years. For a moment, our eyes met in the reflection, and I felt a promise in his gaze. This wasn't over. I drove straight to the police station, Charlotte's remains beside me, the hotel room key heavy in my pocket. It was time to end this. Time to bring Charlotte home and put her story to rest, even if Dylan Roberts never would. I sat in the police station lobby, my leg bouncing with nervous energy. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Charlotte's remains lay wrapped in the hotel blanket on the bench beside me, a small bundle considering the enormity of what it represented. "Mr. Stone?" A woman with short gray hair and a detective's badge approached. "I'm Detective Ramirez. Can you tell me what you've brought us?" I explained everything. The journal, the note, the necklace, and finally, the remains I'd found behind the boiler room. Detective Ramirez's expression remained professionally neutral as she called for evidence techs. They arrived with gloves and bags, carefully documenting Charlotte's remains while I completed my statement. "We'll need you to wait while we verify some details." Ramirez said, pointing me back to the bench. It'll be a while. Hours passed in that lobby. I checked my phone, 4:30 in the morning. My eyelids felt like sandpaper, but sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dylan's melted face twisted in rage as I'd driven away with Charlotte. The station doors burst open and 2 officers rushed in, radio chatter crackling with urgency. "There's a situation at the Northwind Hotel," one said to the desk sergeant. "Multiple reports of breaking glass and disturbances." My stomach dropped. I knew instantly what was happening. I stood up. "That's where I work. I need to go there." Detective Ramirez emerged from a hallway. "Mr. Stone, we strongly advise against—" "You don't understand," I said, already backing toward the door. "I'm the only one who can stop this." Before anyone could stop me, I was outside, running to my car. The drive back to the Northwind took less than 10 minutes through empty streets. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw the devastation. Every window on the first floor had been shattered, glass sparkling across the asphalt in the moonlight. I parked haphazardly and ran toward the entrance, ignoring the sharp pain as a piece of glass cut through my shoe into my foot. The doors hung open, one dangling from a single hinge. The lobby was unrecognizable. Furniture lay overturned and broken. The reception desk had been split down the middle. Paintings hung crooked or lay smashed on the floor, and in the center of it all stood Dylan Roberts. He looked more solid than I'd ever seen him, almost like a living person except for his ruined face. The acid burn seemed fresh, glistening wetly in the emergency lights. "Where is she?" he roared, his voice shaking the walls. A lamp flew across the room and smashed against the wall without him touching it. I reached into my pocket, fingers closing around Charlotte's half-heart necklace and her unfinished note. The last rule Seth had given me flashed through my mind. Confront a spirit with evidence of its crimes to banish it. "Dylan," I called out, my voice weaker than I wanted. "I know what you did to Charlotte." He turned toward me, his one intact eye widening with hatred. "You took her from me. You took her from herself," I said, taking a step forward despite my trembling legs. "You killed her because she found out about your thefts." Dylan let out an inhuman howl, and every remaining light bulb in the lobby exploded at once. In the darkness, his form seemed to glow with a sickly blue light. "She was going to leave me," he screamed. "She was going to ruin everything." I held up the necklace, letting it dangle from my fingers. "I found this with her body, the body you hid." Dylan moved toward me, gliding across the floor without taking steps. The temperature plummeted so quickly my breath clouded in front of me. My hands shook as I unfolded the note, struggling to read it in the dim emergency lighting. "I confronted Dylan about the stolen items," I read aloud, Charlotte's words gaining strength as I spoke them. "He admitted taking them, said it was for our future. I told him I couldn't marry a thief, that I would tell Mr. Mitchell everything." "Stop!" Dylan shrieked. A chair flew at my head. I ducked, losing my balance and falling to one knee. I continued reading, my voice growing louder. "He locked the door. He's so angry. He has a bottle of something, says I've ruined everything. He's coming toward me." Dylan was only feet away now, his melted features contorted with rage. I scrambled backward, still reading. "Charlotte Williamson died here because of you, Dylan Roberts," I shouted, improvising beyond the note's abrupt ending. "You killed her with acid, then took your own life when you realized what you'd done. Your crimes are known. Your victim has been found. You have no power here anymore." Dylan lunged at me with a howl, his hands outstretched. I held up the necklace and note like a shield, closing my eyes and bracing for impact. Heat washed over me, intense but brief. When I opened my eyes, Dylan was engulfed in flames that gave off no smoke. His mouth opened in a silent scream as his form began to crack like dried clay. Orange light pouring from the fissures. The flames grew brighter, forcing me to shield my eyes. A final terrible scream tore through the hotel, then silence. When I looked again, Dylan was gone. Only a scorch mark on the marble floor remained where he had stood. I sat there in the ruined lobby, surrounded by destruction, until police sirens wailed in the distance. I didn't move, couldn't move. My body felt hollow, drained of everything but exhaustion. The next days passed in a blur. Police questioned me repeatedly about finding Charlotte's remains. Forensics confirmed they belonged to a young woman who died in the 1950s. The case of Charlotte Williamson was officially closed 68 years after her disappearance, ruled a homicide with Dylan Roberts as her killer. Seth arrived the day after Dylan's banishment, surveying the destruction with a strange mix of sadness and relief. "You did it," he said simply, helping me right an overturned chair. "You freed her." "And him," I added, thinking of Dylan's final moments. Despite everything, I felt a strange pity for him. A man so consumed by possessiveness, he'd destroyed what he claimed to love. The hotel remained closed for renovations for 2 weeks. When we reopened, something had changed. The air felt lighter, the shadows less deep. The constant background tension I'd grown accustomed to had vanished. One night, I decided to test my theory. At exactly midnight, I took the elevator to the 3rd floor and walked to room 302. The door remained closed, no light spilling from underneath. I placed my hand against the wood. It felt normal, neither cold nor warm. Using my master key, I opened the door to find an ordinary hotel room in the middle of renovation, nothing more. As the weeks passed, I noticed other changes. No baby ever cried from room 124 again. The full moon came and went with no strange occurrences in the lobby. Even the scarred man never returned to request a room. I kept working at the North Wind, though Seth offered me a generous severance if I wanted to leave. Something about the place felt like home now. I'd faced its darkness and survived. More than survived. I'd helped heal it. I didn't throw away Seth's rules, though. Instead, I framed them and hung them in the back office with my own addition at the bottom. Remember Charlotte Williamson. Some places collect darkness over time, and even though the worst of it was gone from the North Wind, I knew better than to assume it was gone forever. Each night, when I took my place behind the desk, I felt like more than just a night manager. I was the North Wind's protector now, its guardian against whatever might still lurk in its shadows. And for the first time since I'd started working there, I no longer jumped at every creak or groan of the old building. The hotel and I had both been haunted. Now we were both free, or as free as places with long histories ever truly get.